YouTube channel. And for all participants, whether they join us or are unable to join us but have registered, we'll send that a link to that presentation out. So I would like to get the ball rolling here. I'll introduce Dr. Sanchez, our speaker, in just a moment, but just to set the context here, I just want to read a couple of very brief statements. The first is from an article posted by the BBC in the last couple of days, which reads as follows: "The grip artificial intelligence has gained over humanity in 2023, or at least the increasing conversations about whether it will be a force for revolutionary good or apocalyptic destruction, has led AI to be given the title of Word of the Year by the makers of Collins Dictionary." Also, on October 30th, President Biden issued a landmark executive order to ensure that America leads the way in seizing the promise and managing the risks of artificial intelligence. The executive order establishes new standards for AI safety and security, protects Americans' privacy, advances equity and civil rights, stands up for consumers and workers, promotes innovation and competition, and advances American leadership around the world, and more. So if we could move to the next slide. With that context, no pressure on Dr. Sanchez, but this is certainly the topic of the moment, and it fits very nicely into MBTA's winter season of Lunch and Learns, which are built around various strategies that are incorporated into our transportation technology strategic plan, with a view to gaining knowledge and sharing information that is both pragmatic and actionable in the next couple of years at the most. So with that context, we're going to target 45 minutes. Dr. Sanchez has graciously agreed to go a little bit longer than that if the level of interest and questions justifies that. But let's get going first with a quick poll of those who have joined us so far. We would like you to tell us how familiar you are with current applications of artificial intelligence in transportation. And this can be from very familiar, in which case you would just click the top button, not familiar at all, click the bottom button, or if it's somewhere in between, click whichever one is most appropriate to you. So how familiar are you with current applications of artificial intelligence in transportation? Okay, Ian, what are we learning about our audience this morning? Okay, well, we've got some who are familiar, maybe even experts, but the bulk of the audience rates themselves as no higher than somewhat familiar with AI, and a larger number than that are not familiar at all with AI. So use that information as you will, Dr. Sanchez. I'm going to just very quickly, if you could move to the next slide, introduce Dr. Sanchez, Tom Sanchez from Virginia Tech. And with that, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation to come talk with the group. And that previous poll fits in perfectly with how I was going to get started, because when I had originally been talking with Mackenzie and then Keith and Griffin, about this idea of talking about best practices for transportation, immediately what pops into mind is kind of some case studies and some examples from around the world of AI being used for different transportation questions. And so, but in thinking through that a little more, there, it came to mind that, well, in terms of the audience, and I'm finding this with lots of groups that I'm talking to that are planners in different areas, they're just starting to learn about what AI is. And so I was a little reluctant just to dive into different kind of specific uses of AI for transportation, and thought maybe it would be useful to back up a little bit and think about, what are the issues, what are the concerns, what are the different aspects that we should be considering before we launch into checking out some of these applications. And so that I'm going to be talking about best practices really from the standpoint of getting started and things to think about as we look forward to adopting this technology, and think about that in a strategic way. And so first of all, when we're thinking about, okay, AI for transportation, certainly I mean, there's a lot to think about right there. Because AI itself is a lot of different things. It's a lot of different technologies, and I'm not going to go through all of these. But this is what I kind of consider the menu of AI, things we can do. And I think the theme that runs throughout these are really lots of data and pattern detection. And so in different modes here, with the machine learning, for again, really important, the type and volume of data that we have there, something like computer vision, that's going to be specific to the application. We're seeing a lot in natural language processing now and the content generation with generative AI like ChatGPT, which has just like kind of exploded onto the scene. So AI means a lot of things. Same is true for transportation. So we say transportation, but that's just not limited to, vehicles and movement, and certainly from a planning perspective. So we're looking at looking at supply and demand, also different outcomes and benefits and impacts to transportation activities. We've got facilities, facility management, things like customer service, depending on the business position, the business position of a transportation, organization. If you think about somebody like Easy Pass. And so transportation really means a lot. AI means a lot. Transportation means a lot as well. So because of that, I thought, there are some particular steps in this process. So how do we decide? Because it's not going to be a case where we say, okay, we're a transportation office, transportation planning office. We're going to start using AI right now. But what's not going to happen is that there's going to be an AI transformation of an office or of an organization. Just like when computers came on the scene, at the office or organizational scale. There were certain areas, certain questions, certain parts of the workflow that were appropriate for using computers, and some that weren't, or some that took a little more time. And so actually, the first application or that had the most demand for computers originally was word processing. And so think about, back in time, oh, computers are going to come on the scene. Computers are going to take people's jobs. Computers are going to be doing everything in the office for us. When actually it was the word processing itself, I think a fairly simple part of the application became the heavy user, became probably the primary beneficiary of having the computer technology. And then it was in time where we start to see kind of spreadsheets with other kinds of analytical capabilities, and then GIS for any of the spatial or the geographic analysis, and then other platforms that came on the scene. And so my point there is that this all, I think the innovation adoption and bringing technology into an office or into an organization happens incrementally. And that is that's in large part to that adoption process of learning about it, getting familiar about it, realizing where it works well and maybe where it doesn't, and then certainly some training needs. So here are a few steps that I see that are related to the process. And as a planner and having a planning background, I like to think that there are a sequence of steps, and it's logical. There's some order to it, and it's rational. And I don't think that that's very accurate in terms of the way that we adopt new ways of working, or new ways of anything, for that matter. So what we're seeing is some really good work being done about AI planning for organizations. And so being able to, bringing in some kind of expertise to say, okay, here are all the different functions that we have in our office. What kind of problems are we focusing on, or what is the need that we have? So I think you're looking for kind of bottlenecks, or you're looking for challenges in the workflow, particularly those that involve lots of information and maybe complex decision making that is fairly intensive. And so we would want to then start doing research and getting familiar with what those applications are, or what those tools look like. What are the experiences that other organizations are having? And so if we've got, I'll just take a very simple example like traffic counting. If we wanted to start using computer vision for traffic counting, we would likely go to peer organizations and say, how are you doing it? What have your experiences look like? What platforms are you using? What kind of investment was involved? So we would do our research on that to find out what's out there and get familiar with how it works. Certainly, we're going to want to know, okay, is this going to be a very big venture for us in kind of investment wise and personnel wise, and certainly any other capital that might be involved. So some sort of feasibility analysis. This isn't so easy because of the uncertainties around really how long it takes of the adoption process, and then where we actually start to see benefits from maybe quicker decision making, or maybe more thorough decision making in the plan making process. But we would want to have some kind of sense of, you know, how feasibility is bringing in these new methods to our organization. Another one around stakeholder engagement. I think that this is important because for, you know, what we hear about AI and the uncertainty, and in some cases the fear that people have, really what I think, you know, kind of based on the unknown. I think, you know, oh, it's going to take everybody's job, or it's going to start making decisions that that are random, or that, you know, are hallucinatory, or some, you know, that are strange, we don't understand. But I think a big part of that is bringing together our stakeholders, and that's you know, the people within our organization, you know, perhaps community members, elected and appointed officials, and other policymakers and decision makers, and, you know, and talking through the types of applications that we're thinking about, what kind of data we're looking at, and just kind of getting everybody a little more familiar with what we're talking about, getting them familiar with the language, and getting them familiar with what are the risks that we you know, that we potentially face. Certainly, then we're going to develop some of our applications. We'll be able to pilot some of those applications. We'll have prototypes. We'll probably run, you know, some tests to make sure that they function properly. They give us the results that we're looking for, and that they're actually benefiting our operation. I think in related to that, I think going into this, we need to be thinking about what our evaluation process is going to look like. How do we know when we're doing a better job? So how do we know that maybe a larger effort in data collection is actually paying off, or is actually benefiting our analysis process, or any of the decision making that we're doing? So this involves an investment in time, and this may be at the management level, or another level working closely with the applications, and also thinking about kind of what kind of metrics we want to use. So we want to know whether it's working or not. We want to know whether it's benefiting the organization or not. So be thinking about, how are we going to know whether we're headed in the right direction? And then if things are working well, our applications seem to be performing okay, we'll want to maybe integrate those with different workflows, start to scale them up, maybe within you know, a particular unit, or maybe across units. And what we're seeing in a lot of organizations now is kind of a central hub for the IT people and expertise that's helping coordinate the adoption of these technologies, and certainly the handling of the data involved. The ethics and regulatory considerations, this is I think very important part of the planning process. What do we, you know, what are the risks? What are our liabilities for the particular kinds of data that we're using? Are we using data that potentially identifies individuals? And whether that's facial recognition, or whether we're we're actually capturing license plates or other forms of identification that may be sensitive. And not and I think our concern is not only in how our organization is using that sensitive information, but if somebody else, if a bad actor gets a hold of that information, what could they possibly do with it, particularly if they combine it with other data sources. And we think about things around identity theft or misidentification, from a law enforcement standpoint and those things. So being careful, making sure that we're ethical in the uses of these methods is a very important aspect of this to think about. And we hear a lot of discussion around that. And certainly continuous learning. We'll have new staff that's coming in, hopefully that will be bringing some of this knowledge to the organization, and we'll have existing staff that will need to upskill and learn about these applications. It seems like most organizations always have people that are kind of interested in, or always kind of up on the different technologies, and they become part of helping the adoption process. Okay, this is a little bit redundant, but what I think are kind of key takeaways as we're looking at investments in AI. And again, this is really AI as tools. So, I think about it as, AI is a hammer, and within, whatever we're building, how many nails do we have? Or is the hammer even the right tool for the job? Maybe we're using screws. So maybe we really need screwdrivers and not, and not hammers. But really thinking about how relevant and potentially impactful these tools can be based on what we're trying to accomplish in our organization, and really from an analysis and knowledge management standpoint. How do we, for the flows of data, the flows of knowledge and information that come through, what of all of that do we really need to is useful for us in our business operations moving forward, and whether that's just reacting to kind of current needs, or if that is in making plans and kind of forecasting for the future, or accommodating demand in the future. So, and there's going to be some infrastructure involved with that, and some investments that need to be made, and certainly there will be costs associated with that. Where are those resources going to be coming from? Are these going to be new funding that are needed, or are these, are we going to have to make some decisions within the organization in order to accommodate some of these needs? I mentioned the ethical and societal implications, and again, be thinking through what are the types of data that we're using, what are the what kind of decisions are we making, what kind of analysis are we performing, and what impact does that have on individuals or groups of people that live within our communities or pass through our communities. And then change management, which I think is an interesting concept. I think we've got some organizations that already have functions like this in place. How do we plan, manage, and kind of, maintain the resources we have, and whether that's human resources or these other investments that we're having to make. How do we watch out for that we're not jumping into it too quick or too slowly, and that we're not leaving anybody behind? We have proper training and upskilling going on, and that any transitions that we have, we're managing that just like we are, these new technologies that are coming in, and so I think that that's an interesting aspect of overall organizational management is, adapting for change, or paying attention to what some of those bumps along the road might be. And so, kind of going back a little bit and saying, really, when we're thinking about AI and we're thinking about adopting it within an organization, and we're thinking about specific problems or specific questions that we're going to be addressing with the technology, I think even going back, another step or to another level is kind of, our goals and objectives, and starting with those. And so I know these were provided by Keith and Griffin. In this case, if for the organization, there are goals, or there are priorities around mobility and access, resiliency, and you've certainly got different indicators and different aspects of each of these. But I think this is actually an excellent place to start, to say, hey, we've got challenges around mobility and access in the region. What within that do we need to focus on? And so do we have issues around congestion that we want to focus on, or do we have issues around public transportation that we think we should start with? Or what are those areas that tie into our mission and our goals and objectives, and then look at our operations and say, okay, here are the different areas that have analytical needs that could benefit from new or innovative methods. And then they end up being tied back to the mission. I think it's very kind of logical, and hopefully reinforces like I said, the goals, objectives, and kind of mission of the organization. And then finally, a few resources. American Planning Association's been doing a great job with in their technology division, getting a lot of this information out there about, what's generative AI, what is, what's AI in general, what are, visualization tools. We got things like digital twins, Internet of Things, smart cities. So they're a great resource for a lot of that kind of information. A recent publication around ChatGPT, and I work a lot with the American Planning Association, so that's why I mentioned some of these reports where the large language models like ChatGPT are obviously, kind of exploding onto the scene. So they're going to be doing a number of publications on that topic, and webinars to help people with, that are tutorials or training sorts of opportunities. And then a report that I finished not too long ago that was really an introduction to AI and AI methods, really kind of getting familiar with the language. Got a couple of case studies in there, but really more of kind of where to get started, or just getting familiar with what AI is and what AI could do. And thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to questions, and it doesn't have to be just questions. It could be comments or experiences that you're having with AI, or anticipating AI being used in your roles. So thank you very much, and look forward to your questions.
Great, thanks so much, Tom. So we'd like to get as much engagement with you as we can. We have a few questions that Griffin is going to pose in just a moment, which were added during the registration process. But if you have a question for Tom now, then either put that question in the chat box, and Griffin will raise it, or if you prefer to ask your question kind of in person, then just raise your virtual hand with the icon at the bottom of the screen, and we'll work through everyone for as long as we have time. Before we get into the questions, though, we're just going to do a quick second poll, just based on your own respective job responsibilities, on where you are with thinking about AI. Here's a few things to consider. What aspect of transportation do you believe AI can have the most significant impact on? You don't necessarily need to be doing these things yourselves right now, but where you think it could have the greatest impact. The first three are the kind of the MBTA goals that Dr. Sanchez mentioned earlier, and the fourth one is everything else. But if you do respond to other, it'd be helpful if you could put in the chat box what it is that you think other would be defined as. So let's leave that poll open for a few seconds. And while we are waiting for that poll, perhaps Griffin, could you just ask the first question from the registration list?
Sure, I can dive into those registration questions. We have a good one here on resiliency. From a resiliency perspective, can AI help in early warning or prediction of severe weather which can disrupt transportation networks, possibly allowing for proactive mitigation measures?
Well, that's certainly a great question, and a perfect example of how we'd like to use data to look into the future. And not knowing anything at all about weather prediction, and kind of the uncertainties, that all of the different variables that are involved with that, I have to assume that there is lots and lots of research going on there, because for AI, because you think about that is a perfect example too of lots and lots of data and pattern detection. And so what we're looking for is kind of, the storms or events that are moving in. What we're really doing is we're looking at them and comparing them to other similar looking events before, and then we're looking at how they move spatially or geographically, and what the how they changed and morphed, and what the impacts look like. So I can't answer that question specifically, but I have to imagine that weather and kind of all of those different kind of atmospheric sorts of effects are really being looked at right now, with the tons and tons of data that they have, and now too with the increase, such amazingly, the increase in capacity for computing and modeling that we have at a very fine grain. And so So being able to model some of these effects at a very granular level. So that's, that is for a lot of these events, being able to better predict what those impacts are going to look like is going to be key. So yeah, I imagine there's lots and lots of work being done in that area, and I'm hopefully they're making some progress.
Can I just add to Dr. Sanchez's response there? MUT actually is working with VDOT and DRPT on what we're calling RM3P, or Regional Multimodal Mobility Program initiative, and part of that is a component referred to as a decision support system with artificial intelligence. So it actually is something that hopefully we'll actually see begin to be deployed in Northern Virginia starting next year. So yeah, Dr. Sanchez is right, and there is a living example happening in Northern Virginia right now. Griffin,
the other thing I wanted to add to that real quick too is the role of sensors in collecting information. And when we think about something like events or air emissions or even traffic activity, it's kind of the more sensors that we have available, the finer the grain of the, at least spatially, of the data that we can have. And so we can learn more as we sense more, plus the picture that we're putting together is more complete about what is occurring. And so I imagine that has to be a piece of it as well.
Sure. Griffin, before we go to the next question, could we put the poll results up if we have them? Okay. Ability, accessibility, resiliency. No one's gone with other right now. That's fine. Okay, well, let's go to the next question, Griffin.
Sure, we got a few more, and I'm thinking a couple of these can be clumped together. This next one in particular is kind of on the long range outlook. What should we be doing in the next few years to prepare for the future 10 to 20 years from now?
And this would be related to AI, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is just learning about the language, learning the basics, learning what these tools are, learning about what kind of data that they use. And I think one thing that we end up seeing is, some of these things we're already doing. And some of these things are already happening behind the scenes. When I'm carrying my phone around and I'm navigating from one place to another, that is a form of AI. When I check my email in the morning, and I look at my spam bucket. That's AI at work. As I'm typing something into a word processing document, and it's anticipating words or suggesting words that I should use, that's AI. It's already in our lives, today, maybe in small ways. And maybe it's like the autocomplete or the autocorrect or whatever you want to call it, maybe isn't doing my work for me, but it's helping me. And certainly things like grammar checkers and spell checkers, we start using some of these tools, and they're there. So I think it's really about I say this a lot, that about just the language of AI and what does it mean? What do we mean by computer vision? What do we mean by large language models? What do we mean by natural language processing? what is machine learning? What's deep learning? What are neural networks? And just getting familiar with those. So when you're in a conversation and somebody says, "Oh, I'm using, neural networks to do the prediction," you'll have some kind of idea of the model and the data that they're using. We don't all understand what's happening kind of in between there. Which is a issue for discussion now, but and we're getting some predictions. But I just becoming familiar with these terms so that when you're in conversations or you're thinking about maybe trying something out, I'm really tempted to say that. And I'm speaking from my own experience on this, is as we learn kind of what's going on behind the scenes, we see a lot of methods like statistical methods that we've used for like a long time now. And for the predictions and looking at probabilities or kind of likelihood, we've been here. Now we're we've got some more sophisticated modeling on it, but the inputs and the outputs are fairly similar. So I would say my recommendation is just kind of learn about what this what they're talking about, and at least in general be familiar with what some of these models look like and what they can do, what they can't do, and and it's just part of a learning process.
Thanks for that response. Yes, to bring it back into, I guess, where we stand present day, we have another question. I guess, how in the transportation industry, what is this sector's utilization of AI currently, and how, I guess it's early on in AI, the technology of it, but what are some use cases of AI in the transportation industry today?
Yeah. Within the last couple of years, with APA, we conducted a survey of all the APA membership of about 30,000 plus members about their level of familiarity with AI, and also their outlook or their perspective on how they think AI is going to affect the profession. And then we also asked them a couple of questions on what areas did they think were most appropriate for AI and what areas were least appropriate for AI. And I will say one of the top areas they saw was transportation. And that came back to the idea of a field or an area that we've been collecting a lot of information kind of for, a relatively long period of time. And we have some pretty sophisticated analysis methods, as well as spatial analysis methods, network analysis methods, that we have been using, and now those are being combined. So some of the people that I've talked to and through the survey results is that transportation really stands to be the leader in a lot of this work, and certainly things like logistics and freight handling, and energy usage, communications, all of these different parts of transportation are gonna benefit from hopefully better data, faster and hopefully improved analytical capabilities to kind of speed up that process if we're doing predictions or if we're looking at impact analysis. And so there again, kind of back to the point I was making before with transportation, is like Well, what of transportation? I mean, there's so many different, so many different aspects we could be looking at, from, a vehicle itself to an entire regional transportation network. So it's kind of like, what parts of those do we want to know more about, or make better informed decisions with?
Sure. Thanks for that response. And I think we're coming almost to the close of our meeting, or a little bit over. Is it okay if we asked you just one more question from the
Oh, I'm
chat?
fine. Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Okay. So we have one from our very own, or formerly our own, Mackenzie Love, which we thanks for participating, Mackenzie. Her question is, what are your thoughts on if or how practitioners like planners should be involved in identifying and mitigating biases in data sets used to train AI? For example, if images of people using to train AVs for pedestrian detection are not representative of people of all skin tones, or if vehicle miles traveled patterns are informed by social cultural needs that may not be readily apparent in quantitative metrics.
Yeah, and that's a very big piece of this, is what's kind of referred to, or at least part of this is referred to, as a human in the loop, where we're still going to need human eyes and human expertise and human intelligence to fine tune these models, be looking, for problems, and in terms of our data sets, making sure our data sets are representative. So if we've got something like, the skin color issue, making sure that within our data set we've accurately represented our population and kind of the range of variability. And that's another aspect of kind of the importance of knowing about our data, is all of the variability that we expect to see in that data set as much as possible. So if you think of a simple example of something like computer vision, we want to make sure that we can recognize a particular object from any angle. Okay, we're not just going to be able to take a 2D picture of a person and use that in our modeling to say, okay, whenever the car, or whenever the cameras on the car see that image, they should recognize that as a person, because we're going to have moving people, we're going to have people that are from different angles, depending on what they're doing, different lighting, other different conditions with weather and glare and reflection. And so that all of that variability needs to be in our data set. And then unfortunately, some of the fine tuning is going to happen when a mistake is made. When say the AV doesn't recognize a tree or a fire hydrant and smashes into it. We've got to go back and examine why was that, that imagery or that object, why was that not detected as for what it was. And I think the issues around other discriminatory sorts of impacts, we're going to need, we need eyes, human eyes, on our data sets and on our analysis methods to make sure, that we're fixing things, that we're learning, along the way. So, the idea about AI replacing, humans, or taking jobs away, at least for the foreseeable future, and what we're seeing now, I think it may actually be a job generator, in trying to figure out all this stuff, all of the things that we're having to fix through experience and learning. Yeah, but I think, human intervention is, I say this now, but I think is a priority.
Great. Let me jump in here. I think we're pretty much out of time, but we do have one more question from Al, which I would like to ask Dr. Sanchez before we wrap up. Has VDOT used AI, to your knowledge, to improve communication with the public during emergencies? And I guess I would take the liberty of expanding that question to include other transportation agencies, be that in Northern Virginia or across the country, using AI to improve communication with the public during weather or possibly other emergencies. Is there anything you're aware of there, Tom?
No, I'm not sure about the communications in particular. I know that there have been a couple or a few different consultants that have been working with VDOT around AI related things, but I don't know about that communications part. But I think that brings up another great example of an application, being able to get out the alerts, and whether that's through signage, or that may be through, being automatically able to detect, hazardous conditions like flooding or slippery surfaces, or obstructions, things like that on the roadway. And then being able to, and whether that's through being able to send that information to devices, as alerts, or if these are roadway signage that can be updated automatically. I think there are a lot of that. It sounds like a great area. I'm certain that they're working on it. But that's a great area, or a great application for the communications part of it. So, but I don't know of specifics on that.
Okay. Well, to Al, we will follow up after this session with the VDOT communications folks and others in the region who are operating transportation services, to see if we can get a bit more information on that, and we'll share it with everyone when we get a chance. I'd like to really thank Tom for your insights. I think it was pitched perfectly to the audience, as self-identified with the responses to poll question number 1. Obviously, we can only really begin to scratch the surface of this topic.
Yeah.
I would say, just as a word of caution for those familiar with the hype cycle, the Gartner hype cycle for emerging technologies, for their 2023 edition has numerous AI-related topics in the part of the curve on the left-hand side, which is referred to as the innovation trigger. And then that culminates with the next phase, which is peak of inflated expectations. And as of right now, there are no AI technologies that have advanced to the trough of disillusionment, the slope of enlightenment, or the plateau of productivity, which typically are all phases in the life of emerging technology. So that's not to say any of these will dive into the trough of disillusionment, but past experience suggests that some will. And I think, therefore, it means this topic is one that we would definitely come back to even in a year. I suspect that the subject will have moved on so much further. Looking kind of closer to that, I just wanted to mention the other 2 sessions in our Winter Lunch and Learn series, which are on the screen now. Most importantly, please save the date for December 7th with an update from Joe Stainsbury on some of the micro transit deployment initiatives that PRTC and OmniRide has been involved in. And then in early January, Paul Satkowski from VDOT Central Office will be giving us some insights on how to prepare projects to adapt to innovation. If you go to the final slide, we encourage everyone to stay in touch with us as we develop this season of Lunch and Learns and other initiatives. So I think we've got one more slide, Ian, to advance to. Thanks. There's a QR code there if you would like to connect with us, to save you the bother of looking for our website. Dr. Sanchez, again, many thanks for giving us your time this morning. I think you've just put in a message to say you're happy to stay in touch. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you. So enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you.